You're watching the Relationship Sexpert Show. I'm your host, Hasani Pettiford, and today we have a phenomenal topic. We're going to be talking about sex tourism. Now, typically, sexual tourism has been associated with older white men traveling to Pacific Asia and engaging in sexual experiences with underage girls, but it seems like this is a phenomenon that's actually taking place in the African American community as well. And we have a wonderful panel of guests. We actually have Jewel Woods, who is an expert on men's issues and the author of the book, Don't Blame It on Real, the real deal behind why men go to Brazil for sex. We have Tracy Williams, who's a professor of Pan-African Studies and Journalism at Kent State University. And on the phone with us, he lives in the States, but he's actually in the Dominican Republic right now. He's a black male professional who travels back and forth from the States to engage in sex, and his name is Steve. Guests, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, you know, listen, I've spent a lot of time doing research for a project that I'm working on and happened to come across your book. And let me tell you, the title alone just caught me. And when I opened up the book and just read what was in the preface,
Sure.
It struck me because it really laid the foundation for what you're going to talk about. This is what it says. It says, if professional black women gave black men what we really needed and wanted, there would be no need for us to go to Brazil or any place else. There are plenty of black women here who are single, but being single and being professional just ain't enough. Now, explain to me this phenomenon as to why black men are taking off and going on vacation, traveling across the world, leaving their wife, leaving their girlfriends, leaving their children to pay for sex.
I think it's obviously a wonderful question, and I'm glad it's being raised. I think the short answer is because they're not traveling for sex. And even I think the brief quote that you just read from the man suggests that the sort of experiences that men are having overseas obviously include sex, but it's not limited to it. And the first thing that man was trying to make, the point that he was trying to make, was that it really is not about what we think of, particularly African American needs in the context of relationships. First, these men get an opportunity to travel overseas. And in many ways, they're traveling away from America, not just black women. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that you hear men talk about all the time is they have the experience of being treated with the type of level of respect, regard, and in some ways reverence that they are never treated here in the States. Mm. So the experience obviously does include sex, and so we can't belittle that, we can't minimize it. But what you find if you talk to enough men is that, first of all, men travel to these places for decades. So there's something that brings them back more than just sex. And that experience includes the way in which they feel affirmed, the way in which they don't feel profiled, for example, racially, the way in which their money sort of carries more weight overseas than it does here in the States. And obviously there's this whole portion about all the negative interaction between black women that they just feel that they don't get overseas. So you have all of that sort of wrapped up into this very dynamic phenomena, and obviously this place called Brazil, which we know historically, and the professor can talk about it, has way more sort of African cultural connections than the United States does. So you have many African American men say for the first time in their life they feel like they're going home. So it's a long answer, but the real reality is that these men are getting way more than sex, and that's what keeps them going back and forth.
Now, Steve, you're in the Dominican Republic right now, is that correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so now in Dr. Wood's book, he actually talks about how men are actually paying for access to this ultimate elite male experience. I mean, are you traveling across the world for simply sex, or is there something more to it? Explain this experience that he suggests in his book.
The explanation you just gave was more accurate than what I expected. It's not simply for sex. In the States, I used to travel to Atlanta, to Miami, to D.C., to Philly. There's no shortage of people willing to have sex with you. That's not a problem. Here in the islands, what they get is a cultural thing where there's total relaxation, there's no drama, there's no white, black, historical anything. You can just kind of like fall back and just relax. On top of, there is 1,000,001 supermodels walking around that doesn't hurt.
Okay, but beyond sex, like for instance, if you're in the States and you're engaging in sex with a prostitute, typically you're paying an amount of money for a specific sexual transaction. How different is it, say, in Brazil or in the Dominican Republic in terms of the experience that you have?
Well, in the States,
Yeah, I think we're experiencing some technical difficulties. But Tracy, let's go to you. As a professor, first, and as a black woman, second, I mean, how do you grasp with this whole concept of men actually traveling overseas for sex? I mean, what does it speak to you?
In a way, it's a slap in the face for black women. However, I think you made a really good point when you said black men felt like they were going home, and actually in Brazil, they probably have more traditional women of African descent there. Here, we've been Americanized, I think, black women. I think the women overseas have not had to deal with the issues that black women have had here in America, and I think that's where we bump heads a little bit with black men. I don't think any woman has supported black men as much as women here in America. So like I said, it's a slap in the face to us, but I can see why they would feel more at home with those other women, because they haven't been, what's the word I'm looking for, soiled like we have over here, I guess.
But hold on. Black men are going to Brazil and all these exotic places for sex. They're having these mind-blowing experiences. They're being pampered in ways they never had before. They're getting treatments that they're not getting from home. So when they come back home, how does that change the dynamic of their relationship? You mentioned in your book how the standards change. I mean, what actually happens in the midst of their relationships after these experiences?
I think it changes a number of ways. And there's actually, one particular chapter in the book which, the title was, ways that you can recognize whether or not your man has traveled to Brazil. And, specific things sexually change. A man's sexual appetite changes, partly because he's been able to enact some sort of experiences that perhaps he hasn't articulated here in the States. And so when he goes overseas, he gets to have these sort of mind-blowing sexual experiences. And obviously, once you've had those, then it's difficult not to want to have those again. Socially, because of the sort of interactions between, and you just talked about the way in which, for example, we stereotypically think of black men and black women interacting, they don't have that, right? They have sort of relationships with these women, oftentimes, I should say, who don't even speak English and only speak Portuguese, and that's another conversation. But those conversations are really based on a type of interaction where it's really non-conflictual, non-dramaful, that's a word, right? Where all the sort of issues that we think that sort of constrain black male-female relationships, the sort of anger, the shame, the disappointment, that's not there. So when they come back socially, they have very little patience for the types of quintessential attitudes that they attribute to black women. And so sexually, socially, and even politically, and this is the point that I don't want to underestimate, to have the experience where you travel overseas and for the first time in your life, you feel as if you're looked upon not for being black or not for being, I mean, for example, literally as I was traveling here today, we were followed by a sheriff for at least, 10 miles. And what does it feel like to actually never have to worry about that? What does it feel like to actually never be questioned about whether or not the Lexus you have is really yours or whether or not you got it from? So those are the sort of things that make their experiences once they come here feel as if that's something they can't get in America. And that type of recognition, that type of regard is what actually brings them, makes them want to go back.
Now, Steve, are you on the phone with us? Are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Quickly, now listen, you travel frequently. How often do you go back and forth to the Dominican Republic?
Every month.
So tell me, what type of financial investment is involved in this type of trip? I mean, after paying for, hotel rooms and airfare and sex sessions and food and entertainment, I mean, what kind of bill are you flipping on a monthly basis?
I range anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000 a month, roughly.
That's an expensive habit. Like, what actually goes?
That's low estimate.
That's
it can go higher. I rent an apartment, which is roughly $1,500 a month. Most people will come for a weekend, talking $50 a night. I rent a condo, so this is mine 24 hours, 7 days a week. When I'm not here, it's mine. I lock it up. So I pay a monthly rate. I'm paying $1,500 a month for an apartment. It's on the ocean. And I have a rental car. That's another.
Tracy, actually, I see your expression as he's going down this list. I mean, what's going on in your mind?
I'm stunned. I really am. I'm flabbergasted. I can't, as I think about it as a wife and a mother, an extra $1,500 to $3,000 a month, what that can do for my family, and it just seems like you're just like literally throwing it up in the air.
No,
And so,
I wouldn't
flabbergasted
consider
might not
throwing
be
it
the
in
only
the
word,
air.
right? Disappointed, angry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't consider it throwing it in the air. If I chose to stay home, I do like at least 15 to 20s a month. I could stay home and work and make 10 times what I make now, but I wouldn't be as happy. I do trainings for people who make tons of money, and they're 50, 60, 70 multi-millionaires, and they're miserable. I choose happiness and contentment over more money. So
And it sounds as if then the
$3,000
question
me.
becomes, Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it sounds as if then the question, and I know Mr. Pettiford asked this earlier about this elite male experience, why then is happiness connected with the Dominican Republic? Since you keep, if that's the key sort of word, what is it that makes you happy over there that you feel as if you can't get here?
Where I come from, people get shot a lot. Where I come from, police follow you a lot. Where I come from is always with women or family arguments. There's always some kind of drama. Here, I don't speak the language intentionally. I don't want to speak the language because I don't want to have meaningful conversations. I just want to relax. So I sit here and I party for 20 days straight. If I feel like getting enough, get up. If I want one to win, I just pick up my phone. If I want to walk out to the ocean, I'm 30 seconds away. And there's no rules.
Sure.
There's no rules and there's no problems that can't be paid for.
Steve, do you want to eventually get married and have a meaningful relationship? I'm just curious.
I've been married and I've divorced my wife. Not because of this, but I've been married to a black professional, and she's a wonderful woman, and it didn't work out. And after I got divorced, I said, now what am I going to do for me? And I didn't want to do the same 40 hours a week and I got on a plane. And I came down here for a weekend. And a weekend turned into a month, turned into every month.
Now, Steve, listen quickly. I want to switch gears for a second. We've had many candid conversations about this whole experience in DR.
Yeah.
And it seems as though, if you're paying $35, $40 for a sex session that could last for about an hour, but the experience with that woman lasts for an entire day, it seems like there's an agenda, there's a motive, there's a game that even she plays. I mean, tell me about what their agenda is in this whole sex tourism that takes place in DR, Brazil, and all around the world.
For the most part, to make it simple, there's two types of women. One who just wants straight cash. They want money, and they want to run back out to the street, and they want more money to run back out to the street. And there's some people looking for a visa. They want to get off the island into the States. So the lady looking for a visa isn't really interested in money. They enjoy just living in a condo for a week or whatever the time's going to be. The money lady, she'll try to hook a guy who's like kind of codependent, and he'll go home, and he'll send money Western Union. $150 a month to him is nothing. The average person here makes $150 a month. So once she gets 3-4 boyfriends, if that's what you want to call them, sending $150, $200 a month, she's now making roughly $800 a month just for going to Western Union, which is 4 times the national average of what people make working 6 days a week. So their objective is to hook a guy, and the $30, $40 for them is nothing. But once they get the guy to think that they really care, and they're good at that, if you don't pay attention, now you're going home, you just say, hey, Poppy, send me $200. I need it for food, I need it for whatever. And $200 for an American is nothing. But once you have 3, 4, 5 guys sending you $200 a piece, now you're looking at $1,000 a month for a local person.
Drew, listen, we have 30 seconds. I want you to just jump in on his comment before we go to a commercial break. I mean, are you getting from the men that you interview a sense of what understanding they have as to what role the women are playing in this cash-flesh connection?
To be quite honest, Jelani, I think that it really doesn't matter to the men. I think that their experience includes women, but in many ways, they're secondary to the experience itself. One of the things I'll say real quickly is that what can't be missed, if we're going to talk about the women, is the fact that they're neither black nor white. In Brazil, for example, to go back to Professor Williams' sort of point, African-American men, particularly professional men, romanticize Brazilian women as having the physical attributes of black women,
yes,
but having the attitudes of white women. And so they're neither black nor white, and because they are African and this sort of Frankenstein mix of cultural, indigenous things, black men get the best of both worlds. So that's also part of the attraction if you're just talking about the women.
Now, that's a good segue into what we're going to be talking about next. I want to talk about the attitudes and the perceptions of black women and why black men seem to stray, whereas black women oftentimes stay. We'll be right back after this commercial break.